Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the #1 source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
You mean to tell me Hank is 5, Brad?
He is 5 years old now.
I did have a oh my god moment about that when I saw that.
That's not okay.
No.
Hank was born last year. We've been doing this podcast for so long now that I can actually remember when neither of your children existed. And Hank, the younger of the two, is now 5.
Yep, he's a whole kid doing kid stuff. He plays travel hockey now. I don't know if I even told you that. He made the travel team a year up.
Yeah, Brad, that's very nice. I'm too busy right now dealing with the passage of time.
You're telling me.
And how little hair I have left. The only thing that hasn't changed over the nearly 10 years we've been doing this podcast is the fact that the Red Wings are in a rebuild.
That is the only constant.
Oh.
No, that is my actual favorite anecdote talking about how bad the Red Wings have been for how long with my friends is we were at the last Red Wings playoff win. We were all in the building. Crystal was with us. She had a tough night. You know why? She was 8 months pregnant with Mika.
Yeah, I remember that.
My kids have not existed in real life for a Red Wings playoff game.
Evan, I swear to God, if either of us have kids and we're still in this rebuild, I don't know that my brain can reconcile all that.
No, I can't do it.
Maybe that'll change the cycle. You guys have your kids, they start making the playoffs.
Yeah.
But then the other one can't have kids because we can't risk restarting.
Honestly, at this point, whatever it takes. Folks, welcome to this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking to you about Detroit's one game that has happened since the last time we spoke, and it was a win. It was a rematch against the Buffalo Sabres, a very critical win against an Atlantic Division foe who's more or less in the same kind of position that they were in. So we're going to talk about that game, how the goaltending and the power play and Dylan Larkin saved the game for Detroit and got them the regulation win. And then we're going to be talking about a few key points for the Red Wings season as we reflect on how this has started. So we're going to be talking about, the team's 5-on-5 or special teams play, Lucas Raymond's maybe sneaky good start, how Dylan Larkin's been playing to start the season, all of that and lots more. We're going to be talking about some NHL news, including a shockingly bad Boston Bruins, a shockingly good Washington Capitals, and other storylines from around the league. All of that and lots more before we jump into overtime. Before all that, I want to let you know 2 things. First, Winged Wheel Podcast Night with the Grand Rapids Griffins is Saturday, January 18th. Go to griffinshockey.com/WWP to get your tickets. A pregame live recording of the podcast that includes special guests from the Griffins, the Winged Wheel Podcast, Grand Rapids Griffins co-branded gray beanie, which is also going to be a very, very in-demand item, and the only place where you can get it at this time is by getting those tickets. So again, griffinshockey.com/WWP.
One of 2 places. I'm sure if you bribe Sebastian Cossa enough, he will fork one over.
And again, we said this last episode, you're running out of time because he is playing way too well. He's going to be in the NHL soon enough, and it's going to be much harder to bribe someone on an NHL contract. That dollar value goes up. Then only Evan can afford those.
That's right.
Secondly, the Winged Wheel Podcast is proudly brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. We just revamped all the Patreon tiers. You get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes and any other bonus content that we record. All of our giveaways, including our giveaway of 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the vast majority going directly to our Patreon supporters, as well as our Patreon exclusive Discord, which is a fantastic community. Part of that revamp of all of those tiers, we have actually Mel is helping us out, and I shouldn't say helping us out. She's running the entire show and has just been like a machine in terms of sending out Patreon appreciation packages, which have started to flow out to people. So really excited for all of you to get that for those specific tiers. So again, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast if you want to support the show. Let's jump into it. Detroit was outshot by 9 shots again, so more in line of what we've seen so far. But Detroit did end up winning their game at home against the Buffalo Sabres 2-1 to break the losing streak and get a good result on the board. So we'll break down, the details of the game and how they got there, but how important was this win for Detroit?
It was huge. I mean, 5-1 versus 4-6-1 isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it's a pretty big deal just because of how you feel about yourself as a team. And obviously, given that it was the Sabres, those records could have been flipped. And again, can't be repeated enough. The Red Wings missed out on the playoffs last year on a tiebreaker. Every single point matters. Doesn't matter if it's October, November, March, or April. They all count the same in the end. So are the Red Wings playing good yet this season? No. Is it good that they've already banked 10 points despite playing this poorly for the balance of the season? That's huge.
Yeah, the Red Wings haven't been great on balance throughout the entire season. This game was an incremental improvement. Dylan Larkin basically said, no, we're not losing. And they got 2 power play goals, and Cam Talbot was excellent. So there's some bright spots that are continuing. Now it's time to build on the other aspects. So was it a complete total victory from start to finish? No, but there's lots of good things to take away from that game.
I think Dylan Larkin saying, no, we're not losing was largely in part of why Buffalo was even on the board to start. They got a shorthanded goal in the first. It was Alex Tuch, who had himself a game.
He had 2 of the best saves of the game.
Oh my God, that was unreal.
Cam Talbot was the second best goalie of the game, and he was better than the Sabres goalie.
And that's a shame because Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is just a top tier name, man.
Oh, it's great. And he has been good in his young career, but I mean, when you're getting upstaged by Alex Tuch in your own crease, I don't know what to tell you.
Sneaky entry into the all-time guy list across the NHL, Alex Tuch. He's just a dude. But for the Red Wings' woes here, in the first period, Alex Tuch stripped Dylan Larkin of the puck as he was trying to break through the neutral zone on the power play, went in and scored. And that was not easy to stomach if you're the Red Wings and Red Wings fans, because you're like, well, this offense has struggled. And it's not like they were terrible in the first period. I don't think they were terrible for most of the game. I'm not going to come out here and say they are a completely reformed team and they played an excellent game top to bottom, but despite their deficiencies in how they're playing this year, this was far and away one of the least problematic versions of it, if that makes sense. So to come away from that first period with a shorthanded goal against, that one had to have hurt.
Yeah, it's a fragile team with a fragile mindset who is really struggling to create offense. And by some metrics, literally the worst team in the NHL at creating offense. Any deficit feels significant this point in the season. And when it's scored in that fashion, I wouldn't blame any fans watching the game who saw that one go in and went, yeah, that's it. We can pack it in.
But the mental deficiencies weren't there in this game, because not only was it 2 power play goals to generate that offense, it was Dylan Larkin both times. And you can see the celebration after the first goal. He was almost muted in that celebration after, the initial excitement, because he was like, no, I'm making up for a past mistake. I'm annoyed that the team was even in this position because of me. And he buried the puck that kind of popped loose after, Kane had it and Larkin was on the right side of the net on the power play, tied the game, and that was key for Detroit. And then later on in the second period, the second power play goal of the period for Dylan Larkin, and ultimately the last goal of the game, it was a secondary assist from Raymond, but a nice pass in front from Alex DeBrincat that worked down low to Larkin, who buried it. And that celebration was a little less muted. That was Dylan Larkin allowing himself to be amped up. That was a double windmill, you said before the show, Evan?
Yeah, straight out of like NHL 14. Just double windmill. Yeah, just letting it rip. It was great to see it. You want to see more emotion out of these guys, and Dylan Larkin to the rescue.
I think I was kind of surprised that Seider didn't also get a secondary assist on the first goal, but all in all, still nice of the power play to show up, make up for a deficiency in the power play earlier, and altogether be one of the 2 biggest reasons why Detroit won this game. The second reason being Cam Talbot, because the scoring ended in the second period, but the scoring chances didn't. And it's not like the Buffalo Sabres had an excellent game. I don't think they were extremely threatening. This very much felt like the Detroit Red Wings were playing to their level and the Buffalo Sabres were playing to their level, and that's why it was a close game. But by and large, I think you saw Cam Talbot come in and make sure that Detroit's 2 goals were enough. 31 saves, a lot of key ones. Detroit didn't there were fewer catastrophic failures in this game compared to other games where they've fallen apart defensively, but they still allowed a lot of the pressure to come their way. They still had the same kind of disjointed 5-on-5 offense, that kind of thing. So it's not like you saw a brand new Red Wings and everything changed overnight. It's just that everything was scaled down, a little bit tighter play. They didn't let the game snowball and get away from them. And anytime that Buffalo did have the pressure, they did just enough to get away. And Cam Talbot did more than enough to keep Buffalo at bay.
Yeah, I used a Simpsons quote when we were talking before. I'll change the words here, but the same concept. What's the opposite of bad?
Shame?
Less shame.
Yeah.
Less shame. Yeah,
Less bad.
Less bad is what this game was. It wasn't good. I'm not going to go so far as to call this game good. I think on balance, if you want to say who is the better team for the balance of this game, it was Buffalo. But it was close. It was like the one Nashville game. You can absolutely see outcomes where if you play this game 10 times, Detroit might win it 4 or 5. It's not like some of the other games they've won where the other team would win it 9 out of 10 times, and that game just happened to be the one. Elite goaltending, great power play. I think we've been saying since June, those are the 2 things the Red Wings needed to have a hope in hell at making the playoffs this year. We knew the 5-on-5 offensive struggles were coming. We knew the defensive struggles were coming. Would the power play and the goaltending be enough to overcome those deficiencies? And in this game, they were.
I don't even know if I would say that Buffalo was the better team on balance. I do integrate the power play into it. I do integrate the goaltending into it. And besides Alex Tuch's unreal saves there, I think what you ended on, Brad, is where I can meet you, which is that, if you run this game 10 times, you might get a 5-5 split. You might get a 6-4 one way or the other. It was close. I do think they both played to their level. The takeaway is if they were playing a much stronger team, then maybe the result wouldn't have come this way. But again, you take the results when you can get them. And we'll talk more about 5-on-5 play and the power play in a second here. But, there is an analog between the results. I don't want to say how they're getting there, but the results in this game and how Detroit was getting results last season. For a lot of the season, there were games that the goaltending stole for Detroit. And for a lot of last season, it was offense firing away at seemingly unsustainable or unpredictable paces. This year, you're not exactly getting that, but it's the power play. If you look at expected goals, among the league's best, if not the league's best, depending on what, model you're looking at. And those 2 things, the goaltending and the power play right now, are what Detroit are counting on to get any kind of points on the board. So is that a good thing if you want to be a playoff team and over the course of a season? No, but I'm not going to sit here and be a doomer and say, oh, it's actually bad that Detroit got 2 regulation points against an Atlantic Division opponent. They got a lot of figuring out to do, and the jury's out on if they're actually going to be able to do that this season. There's not a lot of optimism on that front, but as long as they want to stay in the mix, if they can do that and steal some points, and then, whether it's a addition in terms of a move that Steve Yzerman makes or some kind of change that Derek Lalonde makes or players start to execute differently, then they continue to keep themselves not buried in a deep, deep, deep hole, right? Because Detroit's right in the thick of all of these middling teams right now.
I think one thing we've done is continued to remind ourselves that we're only 10, 11 games into the season. So these sorts of woes that we're seeing in the lack of 5-on-5 production, you're hoping that that's just because it's 11 games into the season. If it's game 50 and we're still having this conversation, we're going to have a lot more doomer takes, which is maybe hard to might be hard to beat hard to top than what we've been doing lately. But hopefully they can continue to build upon this, and we'll see what they've got against the Blackhawks later this week if this truly is the team building in the right direction.
Yeah.
This team needs to beat the hell out of somebody.
Yes.
Because again, there's not been one game this season we can definitively say the Red Wings were the better team on the ice, and they're 5-5-1, which is phenomenal. You bank those 11 points. That's great. They haven't had the easiest schedule, but they have played some teams who are massively underperforming. So they have played some weak teams. Whether or not you thought they would be weak teams at the beginning of the season is a different conversation.
Nashville.
Yeah. Chicago's terrible this year. That's a game Detroit, if they fancy themselves a playoff team, should go out and beat the hell out of. 5-on-5, power play. That's a game where they can finally, hopefully show some dominance over a team. Because, yeah, they've got wins. They don't have any convincing wins. They don't have any masterpiece games. And, yeah, it's only 11 games. Evan's right. But, man, there's not many teams in the league you can circle on the schedule and go, that's the game to do it. But Chicago might be one of them. So let's hope.
The stark takeaway from the Buffalo game overall is they won. They did what they needed to do to win. And that's what you have to appreciate if you're the Red Wings and you build on that. And as the fans, it's not like they went out and put a magical performance up. A lot of the concerns that are still there, but there are some takeaways in terms of things that are promising. Lower down in the lineup, there was some conversation as to whether Berggren was going to be in the lineup or not. Mott's not ready to go yet, and so Berggren stayed in. And I thought, he's not creating in terms of production yet, but he is buzzing a bit more. And I wonder if there was a little bit more wind beneath his wings because of the fear of being pulled out as a 13th forward or being healthy scratched. And I don't know, I'm not counting on the world from Berggren right now. I'm not really counting on the world from many Red Wings right now based on how the season has gone, but it was nice to see him producing a bit more in terms of some excitement that it might come. Not promising that he's going to explode, but there was more of a spark there than I've seen in the past.
He's had flashes this season, more than several other Red Wings forwards, so I don't think he's kicking the door down to be a top 6 forward on this team, but I think there's pretty comfortable argument that he's comfortably in the top 12 forwards on this team right now in terms of what he's bringing night in and night out versus some other guys. And yeah, little extra spark, little extra motivation, never hurt anybody.
So let's now break away. As you guys mentioned, Chicago's the next game Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern in Chicago. That's a road game. And then we're going to be back with you with an episode on Thursday. And that episode is going to be our last episode before Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings on Saturday, November 9th. There's going to be 2 games. So the Friday night game, in Toronto, obviously Datsuk, Hall of Fame, that whole thing. And then on the 9th at home, New York Rangers, that's Winged Wheel Podcast Night. So again, Chicago's the next game. We'll be back with you on Thursday. For now, let's jump into a conversation about 5-on-5 play versus the power play, because I'm kind of surprised that at this point in the season with 5-on-5 offense suffering how it is, that the power play is this good. And I mean it when I say, if you look at, depending on what expected goals model there is, the power play is among the league's best. And thank goodness for that. But that disparity is almost kind of impossible to reconcile. How can a team, I understand the man advantage makes a huge difference, but to the tune of being among the top in the league on the power play and among the worst in the league at 5-on-5 offense, there's got to be a connection there.
To me, this is fairly easy to explain. So you look at their first power play unit.
Wow, Brian.
Well, Brad knows everything.
No,
right?
But it's one of those things where it's hard to see the forest through the trees type of thing. But when you look at the first power play unit, you've got Larkin, Raymond, Kane, DeBrincat, Seider. 5 very, very good players. 5 guys outside of Kane this season, it seems, capable of producing at 5-on-5 and obviously exceptional on the power play. Name one other player on the team who thrives at offense other than those 5 I just listed.
Simon Edvinsson.
A rookie defenseman is your next best option. I rest my case.
And thrives is rich.
Yeah, that's the issue. These guys are great, but you can't play them for 60 minutes a game, and you can't all play them on the same 5-man unit at 5-on-5. And again, we love Patrick Kane. He's not a strength at 5-on-5 at this point in his career. He's capable, and every once in a while you see the flashes, but by and large, this is who he is at this point in his career. He'll tread water at 5-on-5. He'll make some plays at 5-on-5, but he's a power play merchant who can be absolutely lethal in the power play. I think when we signed him last year, that's what we were hoping for. And the fact that we got more than that was great. But this is pretty much what he's going to be. So now you're looking at 4 players that you expect to be able to produce offense at 5-on-5. Okay, and one of them's your number 1 shutdown defenseman. Okay, now you're down to 3 guys who are focusing on offense at 5-on-5. That's the problem. Again, I do put a good amount of blame on Lalonde for this, as does Patrick Kane apparently, about way too conservative, risk-averse 5-on-5 game plan. I get that. But a lot of this is on Yzerman because, oh my God, there's not a lot to work with there. Almost every player they let walk, and then you look at the replacements this year, at least from an offensive standpoint, has been a failure.
See, to point out to it, like we bring up Eric Gustafsson's name a lot, and again, just not worked out defensively or offensively. And another name we haven't brought up, but probably should as long as we're laying blame here, is Vlad Tarasenko's not been good. Like he's 2 goals and an assist, and flat out, if you're bringing in Tarasenko, you need more from him, especially if you brought him in for the express purpose of replacing offense.
What the Red Wings lost in David Perron offense was ballpark 0.5 point per game, but he had that sandpaper and could do a lot of those extra things on the ice that you knew you were losing when you basically made the swap for Vlad Tarasenko. But Vlad Tarasenko's offensive upside was higher, so you were willing to accept that trade-off, except Vlad's producing at a far lower rate than Perron did last year. So that's a net loss. The Gostisbehere to Gustafsson might be one of the worst decisions of the Yzerman era, because for what Gostisbehere signed for versus what Gustafsson signed for is just inexcusable. The only excuse Yzerman has on that one is Gostisbehere just plainly refused to sign in Detroit, and he had no choice.
Well, he wanted term, and I don't know specifically. I've been trying to pin it down. I don't know how much term he was asking to stay in Detroit, and you don't know that he was asking for the same thing from Detroit and Carolina, because ostensibly you can make the assumption that if a player has an opportunity to play for the Carolina Hurricanes, they're willing to take less because they know they'll perform better there.
It's a better team, yeah. And that would be Yzerman's pass in that situation, where if the demands were just so different that it was, but it's fine. But either way, on paper, looking at that contract with Gostisbehere and his production, and then Gustafsson, oh my God. And Berggren, who's for all intents and purposes Sprong's replacement, hasn't been producing like Sprong did. And we look at what Wallman's doing in San Jose, and that that is definitely the worst move of Yzerman's tenure with the Red Wings. This team on paper is not significantly, but much worse than we expected.
Yeah.
In the offseason. None of the guys we thought would be near equivalent replacements to the guys that were leaving have been that. They haven't even been close. So do I blame Newsy for playing this super conservative 5-on-5 style, knowing he doesn't have the horses? No, I absolutely understand the thought process. However, when you're playing an ultra conservative style like this, it's to be an elite defensive team, which they are not. I understand the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's very broke. Fix it.
But the problem is it's broke on either end. And I almost was going to say, I know we talked about this last episode, we're going to be talking about this until something major changes. But okay, you don't want the team to play so defensively, so then you can allow Patrick Kane to be a little bit more impactful 5-on-5 offensively because it's catered more towards the way he plays. Sure. That's going to come with defensive deficiencies, though, and you don't have the blue line to cover for that. You have one pairing who's already holding you afloat and it's invisible a lot of games, but the impact that Seider and Edvinsson have day in and day out, it's like Seider last year, but now Edvinsson can actually hang with him, right? It's very much reminiscent of not the same player at all, play style at all, but the early Seider-Wallman before Wallman got hurt kind of impacts. But you don't, other than them, you have nothing. So you can't back up a system where you allow the offense to run and gun. And so you're just going to get 4, 5, 6 goals against each game.
I understand your argument because, yeah, you don't want to play run and gun hockey if you're going to give up a million chances and you're going to get outshot badly and you're going to leave your goalies out to be
I know what he's doing.
The heroes. It's happening anyway, Ryan.
I was about to say, they're going to give up 6 goals like last game.
Okay, but it can happen, but worse is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but then the offense might be better, and then what you gain is more than what you lose, right? If the Red Wings start scoring 2 to 3 more goals per game, but they start giving up 1 to 2 more goals against per game, that's a net positive. All I'm saying is what they are doing right now is not working at 5-on-5. Again, you look at their record. I have to be clear. There are many positives to take from this season. None of them are happening at 5-on-5. It's the power play and the goaltending that have got them those 5 wins. Fix the 5-on-5. Try anything else other than what you're doing because it's not working. You are generating, what was it? Expected goals for per 60. The Red Wings are 32nd in the NHL. They are the worst team in the NHL at generating chances at 5-on-5. If they're top 10 defensively, no problem. There are many teams that can make that work. No, they're bottom 6 in that as well. It's not working. Try anything else. I understand Lalonde is handcuffed. There is so much he can do with this, what now appears to be severely downgraded roster. But you have to try.
My only thing there is that I want to be careful to not let the discussion boil down to system bad, just go in and draw some X's and O's on a whiteboard in front of the guys and say, this is our new system and it's going to change overnight. It's complicated. It's not just the overall philosophy and whatever specific systems, especially 5-on-5, that are leaning more towards team defense and, dump and chase and all that. And those are all valid things. It's also execution is bad right now. Like players are bad. Some players, and we're going to talk about Larkin, despite him not having like a statistically poor start to the season, there's games where it looks like he's skating through mud. And how many times you must have blocked me in the group chats by now to say it looks like he's hurt. Like this doesn't look like Dylan Larkin a lot of the time. And it's up and down the lineup. Lucas Raymond is, I think, far and away Detroit's best offensive player, and he has 1 goal so far through 11 games. Like there just seems to be everything seems to be disjointed in terms of execution, and that could be fallout from, not adhering to systems or other issues that are related to that, of course, but I just don't want it to be, Lalonde has checked the box on the wrong system and he should just erase that and pick a different one. It's not so simple. This seems to be there's a lot of factors that go into this. Yeah, it's on the players, it's on the coaching staff, it's on management, but you have to be careful not to make it black and white in that if you turn one switch, everything changes.
No, 100% agree. And I don't think this deep into the season they can. Like, it looks like they're running a super conservative 1-2-2 right now is what I kind of see they're doing. They kind of stray from that a little bit and fall more into a trap at times as well. I've noticed. I haven't really been able to pin down exactly what the strategy is there, but it's a super conservative, either 1-2-2 or a 1-3-1, depending on the situation. Sometimes even a 3-2. I don't think that's on purpose. I think that's just guys blowing their
sounds like beer league. We're doing a 4-1,
which to Lalonde's credit, that wouldn't be his fault.
That's when you just rub your temples.
But there is, and we saw a lot of this with LA last year, where by the end of the season, the players got very vocal because LA was running that super, super conservative 1-3-1 where they wouldn't even attack, and the players just hated it. And you could tell that the coach completely lost the room. Like, these guys were miserable running this every game, especially Kevin Fiala, I think, was at the forefront of it. He's this super creative offensive player who was just being stifled because he couldn't do anything. And outside of the system.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I understand defensive structures, and I understand in today's NHL, unfortunately, that is usually the best recipe for winning. If it's working, right now, Lalonde's in this tricky position of, and again, I feel for the guy. I'm not saying I don't see his reasoning at all, but he's got a poor roster that's been downgraded from what he had last year. He's trying to counteract that by playing this super conservative style by saying, I don't have the horses to run the race we ran last year. I have to make this as simple and, calculated as possible so that we don't give up chances. But then he's doing it at the expense of his, horses up front like Larkin and Raymond and Kane, the guys who love to get going and get on the attack and be aggressive and be creative. So he runs the risk of losing them in the room now because they're just going to get miserable. I'm not saying, yeah, you're right. You're not flipping the switch and going to a 2-1-2 and having an open offensive zone and all this. You can't. It's just too complicated to pull off overnight. But there are things you can tweak, right? Like if you look at the Red Wings roster, their right wing is where most of the creativity is coming from. You can tweak your system to maybe run everything out of the left side of the D zone, try to get it up, and you can free up the right side to kind of maybe jump every once in a while, cut to the middle, look for a home run pass, like free it up a little bit more. It's hockey. You can't ever be that calculated. There are times the puck's gonna have to go up the right wall. And if those guys aren't there or they're doing something else and it causes a turnover, yeah, you suffer through that every once in a while. That's the give and take of something like this. But if you can make the guys happier up the lineup, you can maybe produce a bit more offensively. Because as much as we dump on the Red Wings cycle, I don't think the Red Wings ozone cycle is the issue. How often do they ever get the puck into the ozone cleanly to be able to get in? Their transition game is arguably, and I know this is saying a lot, arguably the weakest point of their game.
And from their like transition out, transition in, like it's bad, uniformly bad.
It's horrible. So yeah, if you're running a 1-2-2 and you're running a pretty basic breakout, that's kind of what you got to run for the rest of the year. But you can tweak within that system, and I'm not seeing those tweaks. And you know, even a guy like Berggren, you could tell he doesn't want to get scratched. So his creative juices don't get flowing because he is one giveaway from in the press box, and he knows that in the back of his mind. And we've all played high levels of hockey. We know what that feeling is like, where you're like, I would rather not turn this puck over than score a goal because I know I'm playing next game then.
Especially when you're like the fringe player, like 100%. Yeah.
Yes. And you can see it in a lot of those guys' minds. And it's just, and again, 5-on-5 is the conversation we're having right now. It's bad vibes all around. The defensive system is horrible. The transition game is horrible. The offensive situation is horrible because they don't ever get the puck in the ozone to really flex the creative muscles. Because most coaches, even the conservative ones, have a mindset of once you get to the ozone, do whatever the hell you want. Once you have possession in there, keep an F3 high. Beyond that, we don't care. The Red Wings can't even get to that point because everything else is so bad.
Okay, well, I think we have some more conversation to have about specific players here. But first, let's hear from the sponsors of this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. This episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by Labatt Blue Light. Created in 1983, this premium light Canadian Pilsner is a delicately balanced beer brewed with Cascade hops and a blend of malt. It's fresh, crisp, and brewed to the highest quality standards. There's a little bit of Canadian kindness in every sip of Labatt Blue Light. How did it get in there? They're Canadian. That's how. You can spread the love yourself by sharing a Labatt. And when you do share a Labatt, you're not just sharing a beer. You're sharing an experience that'll pair with anything from hockey to a hoedown. So next time you're watching hockey with your buds, be sure to share a Labatt, because while you might not all root for the same team, although we on this podcast do hope you're rooting for Detroit, you can all enjoy a Labatt Blue Light. We honestly love going to games in Detroit and seeing Labatt being the beer that fans clamor for all over the arena. It's a reliable beer, and it's great to have in your hand when celebrating a goal. So head to the link in the description of this episode or the one you see on your screen to find Labatt in stores near you today. You must be 21 or older, and as always, enjoy responsibly. Welcome back. Lucas Raymond has scored one goal, and if you told me before the season that 11 games in, Lucas Raymond has scored one goal, I'd go, uh-oh. But Lucas Raymond is also leading the Red Wings with 11 points, 1 goal, 10 assists, point per game player through 11 games. And, you know, even if he's not scoring, and even if not, you know, every individual game, I think by and large, he's been Detroit's most impactful forward game in and game out. This is a strong start to the season for him. And the low shooting percentage, like single digit, you know, 5.6 shooting percentage is not good. But it also instills promise to say he's a point per game and he has more room for his shots to start to go in. It's about taking more shots, and it's about, you know, trusting your shot some more, which has been a little bit of a theme with Lucas Raymond in his young career. But still, he has shown that he can improve that. So when that comes, he has even more headroom to perform. So a sneaky good start to Lucas Raymond's season, I think.
Yeah, the shooting percentage leads to believe the goals will come, because 5 is unsustainably low for most players, let alone a player with his shooting talent. And the other promising thing is, well, even when the pucks aren't dropping for him, he's finding other ways to be productive. He's really flexing his muscles as a puck distributor this year, which is good. So you can tell he's not just a one-trick pony. One aspect of his game's not working. All right, I'll lean on the other one, and I'll still be really damn good at that. So you're a point-per-game player with 1 goal this deep into the season and a 5% shooting. There's a lot of reasons for optimism there.
I think if he can just, he's shown the ability to improve his strength on his shots and finding space. And I don't think it's a space thing anymore. When he went through his, sophomore slump, if you want to call it that, a lot of that was that his ability to kind of find space in the NHL went away because the tape was out on him and teams were able to kind of collapse on him really quickly. And then you learn to adapt. That's the normal progression, especially for a star forward in the NHL. So I don't think that's the issue. It's his shots on goal. Like I don't think he's trusting his shot. And I don't know if the offense is skewing towards his shot enough. And it could be that, he's so effective as a distributor that he doesn't have to shoot. And that's perfectly okay. If we walk away with an 82-point Lucas Raymond season and he's sub 20 goals, I don't care. That means he's impacted the offense to the tune of a really good improvement from their star forward this season. But we've seen what his shot can be. You rely on that more and you keep working on strengthening that, then it's not just your distribution and the way you think the game. You can finish it yourself, and I think he can be that guy.
Yeah, if you look at his typical line mates in Alex DeBrincat and Dylan Larkin, like they've got 5 and 7 goals respectively. So that line is contributing. He's a part of it. And I think one of the things he would say is, I want to shoot the puck more. It all comes back to our conversation about 5-on-5 offense generation. And I think that's all part of it. I would say Lucas Raymond, other than not being the captain of the team, the emotional captain like Dylan Larkin is, he is by far the best player game in and game out this season so far.
I think the defenseman might have something to say about that. Definitely, I would say forward.
Who's been
I agree. Both goalies, Seider and Edvinsson, you could make a case.
I agree. I think Raymond wins out if you're taking skaters, but I think the defenseman can. I think Seider could make a case, but I agree. I do agree with you. I'm just being annoying, which I don't know if you could believe that I'm being annoying.
I can't.
Thank you. All in all, it's a promising start for Lucas Raymond. That even when things are bad, offense is bad on this team. Offensive generation is bad on this team. It seems like Dylan Larkin's not off to his hottest start. I know the results are there, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but he's not, in terms of the play that we're seeing on the ice, off to his hottest start. He's not himself right now. And through all of this, Lucas Raymond is still good. And while we're talking about, Raymond, at the same time, let's talk about Seider. Yeah, Seider has had games where he's had mistakes, blah, blah, blah. But he is still, if you look at the metrics, Seider is the reason why anything exists in terms of defense right now, and his partner, who this year happens to be someone who can actually hang with him and contribute to that. So it's not all just on Seider. It's on his pairing. So it still is kind of all on Mo, but there's 2 of them. But Seider is continuing to have a good season, even when the defense is atrocious. So, silver linings that aren't going to put points on the board by the end of the season the way the Red Wings need them. But at least we're not talking about, this team's not playing up to scuff and they have a lot of problems on the roster, and oh, by the way, Raymond and Seider are also bad. That's not the case. They're actually performing really well, even in the context of things are scary bad right now.
Well, it's back to that power play conversation we had. There's 5 good players on this team.
Yeah.
So it's promising. And again, when you look at Raymond's strengths, he's very creative. He's excellent off the cycle in the ozone, which he's not getting much opportunity to use, right? Imagine if the Red Wings ozone time went up 2 minutes a game. How much of that do you think would be Lucas Raymond and his line?
1 minute and 57 seconds.
And you give him that much extra time in the ozone, and hopefully a lot more shots. Lucas, shoot the puck.
Yeah.
We need someone with a white sign that sits behind the opponent's net every time he touches the puck to just hold it up and says, shoot.
Well, eventually with that line, the teams are going to notice that, all of the goals are coming through DeBrincat and Larkin. They're going to start cheating over to those guys, and the avenues for shooting will open for Lucas Raymond. So I'm hoping it's just a matter of time and things will really start to happen there.
A facet of this is also like Patrick Kane has been bad 5-on-5. Stating it plainly, like it's not been good. And I do think it's worse this year. How much of that is the scheme they're playing and how much of that is just him at this point in his career? I think it's a lot of both. But I also wonder about how much of this is going to be kind of, for lack of a better word, we'll call it Brad syndrome, which I mean to be old man syndrome, which is that you don't really start the season. You got to shake off the rust. You got to get the juices flowing. Guys at this stage in their career, they know how to kind of load manage themselves because it's a long season. You're not going to see the same kind of effort in game 10 from someone late in their career as you would in game 75 when they're making a playoff push, because they know how to conserve their energy, and they don't really readily admit this. But think about Perron last year. Perron started off last season terribly, bad. And by the end of the year, he was still taking stupid penalties, but he brought himself back to being a force for the Red Wings offense. So, Patrick Kane gets going a little bit more 5-on-5 as the season goes on, as he kind of shakes off the rust and gets into game shape and goes at it a bit harder. Then maybe that's something that boosts all the offense around him as well.
I don't even think it's an age thing with Patrick Kane.
Of course you don't. Yeah.
No, because obviously we're going to talk about things that I'm terrible at myself. But how is Patrick Kane in the defensive cycle? Don't sugarcoat it. How is he in a defensive zone cycle?
He's not in it.
Okay. How good is he with his legs and transitioning the puck, or the team in general with him on the ice?
His legs aren't what does it. It's his brain and his decision-making and his stick handling and passing.
But would you call, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good his ability to get the puck from the D zone to the O zone at this point in his career?
NA.
Okay. How good is he at running the offensive zone cycle?
Excellent.
What can the Red Wings not get themselves in a position to do this year?
The offensive cycle. I hate when Brad lectures me. I feel so small.
These are rhetorical questions, right?
Yeah.
So the number one thing that makes him an elite player is the number one thing his teammates are struggling to put him in a position to do with their 5-on-5 play this year. So obviously he himself is a part of that reason. He can help in a defensive zone cycle. He can help transition the puck, although those two things have never been elite traits of his.
Did you bring Patrick Kane in to play defensive zone, or did you bring him in to hit home runs and do 6 cellies?
Exactly. And basically,
this is just Simpsons quotes.
His offensive zone start percentage should be 100%.
Exactly. It's like giving Mark McGuire an at-bat and not giving him a bat to do it. That's what the Red Wings are doing with Patrick Kane this season.
It's like giving Mark McGuire an at-bat and not giving him the PEDs to do it. Anyways, is that going to piss anyone off? We'll find out.
Mark McGuire, big listener of the podcast.
Look, man, bring me back to the McGuire, Barry Bonds era. Just like juice to the gills, but they were mashing that thing. So another offensive player here that I want to talk about, and it almost feels like silly because 7 goals, 1 assist, 8 points through 11 games isn't a bad start for a forward. But for Dylan Larkin, you would almost think that he'd go as Lucas Raymond goes. And if you've watched the games, you see him. I don't know how else to articulate it other than simply he doesn't look like Dylan Larkin out there right now. And I'm not trying to say there's some phantom injury that we're not hearing about or anything like that, but it just seems off. And that start is, I think, also a big part of why, whether it's a symptom of the 5-on-5 offense not being good or a cause of it or some combination of both, I think it's notable. And it seems silly because he single-handedly him and Cam Talbot won the game for the Red Wings against Buffalo. And that's great, but that the power play is what's going well for Detroit. So, none of this applies to power play. But, the rest of the game, am I crazy or does Larkin seem
slow?
It's off.
The word you're looking for is slow. And yes, he looks slow.
Which is crazy because it's not like he's in a lineup with a bunch of water bugs.
He has an elite offensive mind, so he could be as slow as Patrick Kane and still be able to go out there and contribute on a power play, which is what he's been doing, so nobody's surprised. His best trait coming into the NHL was his speed and his ability to transport the puck. I haven't done a deep dive on it yet to know if his transition struggles and the fact that he looks slow is due to the fact that the team and the structure and everything that we've already talked about is not putting him in a position where he can ever carry the puck with speed, or if he's just getting slow. Like,
no, it's not the right point in his career for a player of his speed and caliber. No, it's something else. There's no way that Larkin that's like 5 years too early.
I agree fully. I think the most likely scenario with Occam's razor is he might just be fighting something. Because you're right, he looks off. Like, just the way he's playing, his style, his speed, his aggressiveness, it's not Dylan Larkin. When you see players' game change that significantly, like, we're not talking it's night and day, but like, it's noticeable. 9 out of 10 times it's an injury. Again, age is eventually going to catch up with him on the speed thing, but he's not even 30 yet, so don't think that would be it. And again, I can blame the system and the teammates all I want, but there's still opportunities to transport the puck solo, no matter who you are, in a given hockey game, just through turnovers, other teams' breakdowns, and it's just not there, and I can't pinpoint what it is.
And I want to make clear, this is all relative to the very high bar that Dylan Larkin sets. Like, Dylan Larkin's version of bad is still 5 power play goals, 8 points through 11 games. So it's almost, a microcosm of Detroit where we're like, oh, they're not playing their best this season, but they're still, 500. It's actually, I think that would be a disservice to Dylan Larkin and what he's been able to produce. And when the game is in the offensive zone and, Detroit does have control and the power play is an easy way to look at that, he is still Dylan Larkin there. So that I want to make clear. It's not like Dylan Larkin is bad and he's the source of all of Detroit's problems, but we're used to the captain taking over games, and we're used to him kind of dragging this team kicking and screaming forward. And a lot of the times I realize, I'm like, oh, we're in the third period and he's been, as invisible, or he looks like he's fitting in with the rest of the team in this game that's not really going their way. So, if you want to be an optimist, if you want to get away from the doomer feel of any of this, if that's how you're choosing to interpret it, the optimistic view is, same way we said Lucas Raymond has scored 1 goal and has still been great. Well, Dylan Larkin has 7 goals and an assist and has room to be way better. And that's not even just finding another gear. That's just the gear that he's usually on. So that's an if. You still have to get there. And whether it's injury or whether it's, system or whatever it is, you trust that 28-year-old Dylan Larkin is not, being held back by Father Time and will get back to Dylan Larkin, then, offense gets better once that happens.
The Detroit Red Wings go the way that Dylan Larkin goes. When he got hurt last year, this team basically imploded. And I think right now it's the exact same thing. The Red Wings aren't good despite, gathering more points than they probably deserve. And I don't think Dylan Larkin's been particularly himself, despite the amount of points that he's been able to accumulate. So, yeah, I think just like Lucas Raymond, he'd be looking for more out of his game. And I would expect a guy like him to figure it out. I think the team and Dylan Larkin have kind of had a tough time figuring out where they're going this year so far.
Okay, why don't we jump into some NHL news here? And let's start with how the Boston Bruins are very, very, very obviously just trying to goad me into finally predicting that this is their downfall. And the moment I do that is when they're going to bounce back, because the Boston Bruins are currently below the Detroit Red Wings in the Eastern Conference wildcard standings. They have the same 11 points with 2 fewer regulation wins and 1 more game played. They have 12 games played. They were below 500 and they've looked rough. They're coming off a win, but other than that, they have not looked good. You're hearing, coaching change talks. You're hearing this is not the Boston Bruins that we expected, and far different than what you saw last season. McAvoy doesn't look himself. You want to say this about the Red Wings. All this can apply to the Bruins.
I might be onto something here. You mentioned McAvoy doesn't look himself. Larkin doesn't look like himself. There's a couple other key players in the Atlantic that don't look like themselves. Have you ever seen Space Jam? Is there a hockey game with the stakes of the universe going on involving Bugs Bunny?
Intergalactic hockey game.
Who would be the LeBron James or Michael Jordan?
Where is Wayne Gretzky right now?
Connor McDavid is absent as we speak.
Brad, this might be the best tinfoil hat theory we've had so far.
Certain players in the NHL suck because of the Looney Tunes.
The Atlantic is playing out like how we thought it would. Florida, Tampa, Toronto on top. Ottawa, Detroit, Boston, Montreal to a degree, fighting it out for this middle-ish. Are any of these teams going to take a wild card spot? The only weird part is Boston has fallen out. Now, we did say someone's going to fall out of that top. It's likely to happen. But it's weird that Boston looks this rough to start. And if this holds all season, man, that is a prime opportunity for Detroit or anyone else. Detroit's playing bad, but they still have the points. And so if they find themselves able to hang on, or if you want to say Ottawa or whoever, like that's a massive opportunity if Boston's out of the mix.
It's a huge opportunity. None of the teams are really jumping on it right now because the Atlantic beyond 3 teams is the ultimate mid-off right now. I mean, yeah, I'm surprised. I'm never going to say I'm not surprised by Boston falling off, but everybody's seen the flaws in their team for a couple of years now because they've been over a few times now the pick du jour to fall off because Marchand's getting older. They lost Bergeron, didn't really replace him. Swayman's obviously great, but they don't have the Ullmark safety net behind them. They're 2 big offseason additions in Zadorov and Lindholm. I think everybody on the face of the earth, the second they were signed, went, I don't know about that. Lindholm's a great 2C on a great team, but he ain't a 1C. Zadorov's a great 3-4 guy, but he's not worth what he's getting paid. That roster has a lot of flaws and some real depth issues. This might just be the year it catches up to them.
I will not be the one to predict it. I refuse.
Nope. That's why I said might.
Boston just had awful goaltending to start the year. Jeremy Swayman obviously missed training camp. It's going to take him a while to get up to game speed. Jonas Korpisalo in games is a weighted coin flip at best. So I think they're going to just need some time to figure it out. But I agree with you guys. When you look up and down the roster, there's not a lot of depth on this team. And when those guys you bring in, like Zadorov and Lindholm, are expected to play major roles, and they haven't been all that great so far, you're going to start losing more games than you thought you would. So I think Boston's just a matter of time to get their goaltending sorted out. Swayman's going to have to play a lot better, but I still think they're a playoff wildcard hopeful.
On the flip side, Washington's tank season isn't going well. They're near the top. They're playing right now, and they're losing to Carolina 3-2 in the third. But as of right now, they're 8-2, near the top, and they're doing all this while not throwing away the whole reason they're really playing right now, which is to get Alex Ovechkin the goals record. He has 7 goals, including this game. And Pierre-Luc Dubois hasn't been a travesty for them. This is wild.
No, they're above the playoff bubble, so they're far from the Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, I should have seen that one coming.
No, the Capitals right now are learning a lesson the Red Wings learned successfully last year. Vibes matter. When you're having a good time, and obviously having something so significant like Ovi chasing the goal record, it's going to create a very fun environment. They're playing loose. They're playing, confident. Their GM made a big splash in the offseason acquiring actual good players somehow. We'll relitigate their contracts later, but either way, for the time being, they're obvious upgrades. They just look like a team that's having fun.
John Carlson is 34 years old and playing 25 minutes a night.
Is he one of the more underappreciated defensemen in his era?
Yes.
Oh, 100%.
People think he's just a, power play merchant or whatever, but he is he's deserved every bit of contract and praise he's gotten from Washington.
They've made some shrewd moves this year. Like they brought in Rasmus Sandin, they brought in Jake Chychrun. Pierre-Luc Dubois doesn't look bad in Washington, which is an absolute shock to everyone.
Yet.
They brought in Logan Thompson as well. So they made a lot of additions. I think a lot of people were wondering, do they really know where the direction this team is going? And they said, yes, we're going to make the playoffs.
Does Ovi get the goals record?
I think I saw something. He's on pace to hit it this year, which is crazy because isn't he like 47 years old now?
He is. for all the accusations of Ovi being, not in shape to start last season, and maybe Father Time's catching up to him, and, maybe he's not doing what he needs to get in game shape to start the year. Well, this season he dispelled that. 6 goals in 10 games to start. He is at .859. The record is .894. If he does it this year, that is insane. That is one of the best late career feats of all time in the NHL. Stating the obvious, but the fact if he can do this just in the season without needing the next 2, that would be wild. Anyhow, we'll see how that all shakes out. We talked a lot about the standings last episode and the ones previous as well, but again, all of this just lends to, despite the bad start for the Red Wings, there's a lot of teams kind of in this mucky middle. They're, take away the Florida Panthers at 19 points, which who's going to beat the Panthers right now? I've yet to see someone really challenge they're going to be the ones to meet them in the Cup final.
The Panthers are so good this year. Even the Carolina Panthers won a game today.
The Carolina, what?
Bryce Young won a game. All things are possible. This is why I have hopes for the Red Wings still this year.
Sports are so weird right now. Second place Tampa and 6th place Boston are separated by 3 points. And Jesus. We're 12 games into this season. So that is not some kind of special statistical anomaly, but Detroit's in the thick of that. They're right in there at 11 points. So it's not all hope is lost, and at least they're not at the extremes, Okay, let's take this episode to overtime.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. The giveaways, the bonus episodes, the Discord, all of the revamped tiers, all of that are some of your perks. You allow us to do things like host Winged Wheel Podcast Night in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings and the Grand Rapids Griffins. You allow us to support the Jamie Daniels Foundation through those events. And in a lot of other ways, by the way, Hot Stove Stories, Rounding the Bases with Mike Tirico and guests is on Tuesday, January 14th. Go to jamiedanielsfoundation.org. Tickets on sale on November 7th. So they're on sale very, very soon here. You also allow us to produce other great content like Expected by Whom, hosted by Prashant Iyer and Sean Shapiro. All of that and lots more. So again, patreon.com/winged wheel podcast. Let's take some questions here. Joseph Barry says, what does Detroit need to do in November to have a realistic chance at playoffs in terms of their record? Realistic, I would say they have to go above 500 to make it so they're still in the conversation. I think they have to continue at 500.
I think they need to be above 500. I know the mushy middle's pretty thick in the East right now, but you have to think a few teams are going to start separating from the pack. That's why so many people talk about Thanksgiving as kind of that cutoff line of you better be in it here, otherwise you got your work really cut out for you. So I don't think 500 cuts it this month.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we also need to get, this past month with the 11 games, it's been, okay, the Red Wings got points, but they look terrible. Now it needs to be the Red Wings got points and things are progressing, things are growing, they're getting better. We can't have another month of they're lucky to have gotten this many points.
Evans RBF says, what player from Red Wings history would you bring back to incorporate into this team? It's Nicholas Lidstrom, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's so many offensive players. You take Steve Yzerman, you take Sergei Fedorov, whoever. You take Dominic Hasek in net, but the defense is the biggest hole. You add in one of the greatest defensemen of all time, maybe the greatest defenseman of his generation.
What if you bring Fedorov back and he plays defense?
Yeah, that honestly might be. I would take that. If you said that's your only option, I'd still be happy with that.
I kind of like it.
Jack Enthrolato says, which of these two things would get Yzerman in more trouble? Falling behind in the standings this year or a first-round prospect flaming out? Which do owners care about more and which should fans? The owners would definitely care about non-playoff appearances. Would it get him in trouble? I think Yzerman has the longest runway in the league by default because of who he is and the cover he provides for ownership and all of that. But yeah, and which should fans care about more? Depends on the context. If you're the Edmonton Oilers, then the playoffs matter a lot more. If you're the current Detroit Red Wings, then you care a lot more about a first-round prospect flaming out. But you also remember the percentages. Not every first-round prospect's going to make it.
Yeah, most first-round prospects make it.
But make it, right?
Yeah, like Rasmussen is on the team and a solid contributor, but relative to a 9th overall pick, it's a massive disappointment. If Kasper or Danielson turn into Rasmussen, that's a huge problem. Those guys need to be more than that. And Sandin Pellikka needs to be able to run a power play. And I'm pretty confident saying every first-round pick in the Red Wings system right now is going to be a Red Wing. They're progressing well enough to make the roster in short order. There are a lot of concerns around some of them about how high up the lineup they can play. And the range of outcomes on a couple of them is pretty wide. So that's the concern. It's, do they have a single prospect that could be better than, or even in the tier of a Raymond or a Larkin? And the answer right now is probably no, which creates issues.
Jay Fresh's extra medium cheese bag says, I'm 99% sure that at least one of the GMs would offer something stupid for Sherratt at 50% retained at the deadline. I hope he stays healthy for that reason. Yeah, in terms of, I mean, Sherratt's not, if he gets hot at the right time, I could see that being an attractive piece for a team that wants to add some sandpaper to their third pair kind of thing. You put him out in statement moments and games in the playoffs. Like, that's absolutely a utility guy for that reason. So I don't think it's out of the question. It just depends on what position Detroit's in. Do you do that for like a, late round pick kind of thing? The jury's out because, yeah, is Sherratt the best defenseman in the world? No, but the bar is extremely low on the Red Wings, and most nights he's above it. So you might be mad to hear me say that, but think about how bad it can get, right? Like, who's going to come in and replace? It's stark. Eric Gilo says, so it was Mata all along, huh? I kid, but how good does Albert Johansson look? Can we keep him in and just rotate Petrie, Hall, and Gustafsson until he has a terrible game?
He's been all right. I don't think he's been the worst defenseman on the team. I think he's definitely been one of the 6 best, so I'm in full agreement to keep him in the lineup. There's still some growing pains there that have been pretty obvious, but also he is a more capable puck mover than those around him, which is a trade-off I'm willing to make.
Yeah, he's having the season you were expecting him to have, right? Like, showing some capability, definitely showing, where the NHL is different than even the AHL, how it's harder to apply your hockey sense to the NHL physicality and speed and pace, but he's shown enough where you're like, yeah, it's worth keeping him in there. If this was a much better blue line, I would say he'd be in the press box more nights than not. But between Hall and Petrie and Gustafsson and anyone else, like it's almost fortunate for him that he has an opportunity because the blue line is so weak. So yeah, he's shown promise to be able to hopefully stick in this lineup long term, but it's not like he's kicking the door down or anything. And that's okay. Not every prospect will. Last one here is from Cletus. He says, is it just me or is this team boring as hell? Feels like nothing happened for Detroit 58 minutes of the game. Is this a coaching staff / game plan issue or is this a raw talent problem? The dump and chase game is terrible. They seem to always be on defense when they lose the puck the second it goes over the blue line. So obviously that's what we've been talking about for the past however many episodes now. But it's funny because it does feel, if you don't watch other teams, I encourage you to go watch like a high-end team play hockey. Not to make you feel bad, but it does feel like sometimes a whole different sport. And I don't even think the Wings were like this. They've been like this off and on during the rebuild, but last year, like when the offense was really buzzing, there was excitement. There was a little bit more of a connectedness to the offensive, like within the offense and also between the offense and the defense, little though there was. It does feel just a little bit like the puck is being chipped around and dumped around and chasing it. And you almost, unless you're intentionally trying to pay attention, which obviously we're doing, you kind of glaze over. You're like, yeah, what's actually happened? It's hard almost to even get a sense of where the thermometer is on the game. And that makes for tough watching. The reason I bring it up is it's like when people are like, how are you complaining about this record when it's not so different than, X point last year and the results still have them in it? It's because these fans are watching the games, and this is not the same process to get them to these points as you saw last year, right? And you can't show the fans that product last year and then show them this one this year and expect them to be happy, plain and simple. So there's a lot of debate on what's okay and how is a sustainable good way to get wins, and points are points. But in terms of keeping the fans engaged, like it's thank goodness for the goaltending and the power play.
That's all we have going for us right now.
Okay, we are going to wrap up this episode of the Wing Wheel Podcast. Again, we're going to be back with you on Thursday. The Wednesday night game against Chicago is coming before that. Also, this weekend, Saturday, November 9th, is Winged Wheel Podcast Night at the LCA in partnership with the Detroit Red Wings. There actually is a few more tickets that were added. We completely sold out, but I think a couple of straggler tickets were added in there. So I think they're Upper Bowl tickets. If you want to get a chance to go do it, you also get the co-branded Detroit Red Wings Winged Wheel Podcast jersey. All in that, lots more, wingedwheelpodcast.com/Red Wings. But for now, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. New listeners and old, we can't say thank you enough. To all of our Patreon supporters, you're amazing. We love you. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to join the Dub Club. And if you want to support the show, but Patreon's not for you, leave a rating and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, hitting that subscribe button, leaving the rating, the thumbs up, whatever. It does help a lot. Tell a friend about the show. All of that. Those are all ways you can support the show. To the sponsors of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we thank you so much. And to all of our name level supporters on Patreon, we could not do this without you. Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Aikfer, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Alexander Hansen, Ghost of OSBP, Glenn Brabham, Crodner's Left Knee, Ashley Whitehead, Sea Lion, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Asher Killian, Beer League legend, brand new name level supporter, Carl Brutina Nanaluski, Carl Provy, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, Cider, Dickens, formerly Marlon Winchester, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, God Creatives, Gin and UC, that's good. Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jeff Pridemore, John Engels, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Marcus, Marty, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Michael Edlund, Mr. Kuzi, Pickleball Sucks, Just Played Tennis Dork, R.A., Riley Enright, Ryan Britt, Scott Martin, Skeletor, Stephen Ordeleb, That's What I Appreciate About You, Wallman's Elite Dancing D, Eyes Are Playing Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, Sam Bankson, A.A. Ron, A.B., All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Antonio Gracias, Axel Sandy Pelika, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, Chimkim Nutgits, Commander Ben Baron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Leighton, Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsukes Dangleberries, Dylan Larkin Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Frank Stanley, Gene Sullivan, Golf Sucks, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Josh Yelton, Keenan O'Donohue, and Casper the Unfriendly Ghost, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, I think new name level supporter, Les Grossman's Ungodly Firestorm, Linda Hull, Lucas Raymond, Ophelia, Oz Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Steven, that other guy, the Hodag, the Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Wings fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. We'll see if Showtime returns in Chicago.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at WingWheelPod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.